They laughed the moment he pointed at the smallest horse. Not a soft chuckle, not a polite smile, but loud, careless laughter that cut through the auction yard like a slap. Men leaned against fences, shaking their heads. Someone muttered that the horse wouldn't last a winter. Another said it was a waste of money. Daniel Harper heard every word, but he didn't turn around. The horse stood alone at the far end of the pen, too thin, too quiet. While the other horses pushed and snorted and fought for space, this one stayed still, her head low, her legs trembling just enough to notice if you were looking closely. She was a young mare, smaller than the rest, with a dull brown coat and a white mark on her forehead shaped like a broken star. Daniel felt something tightened in his chest. He had come to the Montana livestock auction with no plan to buy a horse. Money was already tight. His ranch was small, inherited from his father and barely breaking even. He told himself he was just there to look, to pass the time. But the moment he saw her, that lie fell apart. "She's not worth it," the auctioneer said loudly, not even trying to hide his doubt. "Skinny, nervous, probably sick. You sure, son?" Daniel nodded once. "I'm sure." The laughter came again, louder this time. He paid less than anyone expected. Almost nothing, really. A few crumpled bills exchanged hands, a quick signature, and suddenly the smallest horse belonged to him. As they led her toward his trailer, she resisted at first, her hooves sliding in the dirt, panic flashing in her eyes. Daniel didn't pull. He didn't rush. He just stood there, speaking softly, letting her feel the space between fear and safety. Eventually, she followed. The drive back to his ranch was quiet. The sun dipped low over the plains, painting the sky orange and red. Daniel glanced at the trailer in his rearview mirror more times than he could count, half expecting something to go wrong. When he finally pulled into his property, the air felt different. He didn't know how else to explain it, like something fragile had crossed an invisible line. He named her Willow. The first night was hard. Willow refused to eat. Every sound made her flinch. When Daniel stepped too close, she backed into the corner of the stall, eyes wide, breathing fast. He slept in the barn that night, sitting on an old chair, not touching her, just being there. By morning, his back ached and his eyes burned, but Willow was still standing, alive. Days turned into weeks. Progress came slow and uneven. Some mornings, Willow took grain from his hand. Other days, she wouldn't look at him at all. Daniel learned her moods, her fears, the way she startled at raised voices or sudden movements. There were scars under her coat, old ones, half-healed. He didn't ask questions out loud, but the answers lived heavy in his thoughts. People stopped by the ranch sometimes, neighbors, old friends. They'd glance at Willow and shake their heads. "You should have bought a stronger one," they said. "That horse will break your heart." Daniel never argued. He just kept showing up, every morning, every night. What no one saw was the way Willow watched him when she thought he wasn't looking, the way her ears tilted toward his voice, the way she stood a little taller each week, like she was remembering something she had forgotten about herself. And what Daniel didn't know yet was this. The smallest horse he had ever chosen was about to change his life in a way he was not ready for. The laughter wouldn't last forever. By the time spring rolled over the Montana hills, Willow had transformed, not just in appearance, though her coat had regained a warm sheen and her legs grew strong, but in spirit. The timid mare who once trembled at the sound of his boots now walked beside Daniel with confidence, her head high, her eyes alert and intelligent. People passing the fence would stop and stare, whispering to each other, "Didn't he pick the runt of the lot?" Daniel ignored them, but he could feel their doubts fade as Willow trotted past them like she owned the land. One morning, while Daniel worked on repairing a fence near the pasture, Willow wandered closer than usual. She stopped, looking at him with an intensity that made his chest tighten. Then, without warning, she nudged him gently with her muzzle, knocking the hammer from his hand. Daniel laughed, the sound breaking the quiet of the early morning, and scratched behind her ears. She leaned into the touch, her warmth seeping into him. It was in that moment, watching her, that he realized she had saved him as much as he had saved her. Over the next few weeks, a stranger appeared in the valley, A woman named Evelyn Hayes, a traveling horse trainer from Colorado, had heard about Willow through a friend. She came to see if Daniel needed guidance. At first, he was hesitant. He wasn't used to outsiders, and he wasn't sure he trusted anyone with Willow. But Evelyn had a calm presence, and the way Willow responded to her without fear made Daniel curious. Days turned into lessons. Evelyn showed him techniques to build trust and strength, ways to challenge Willow without scaring her. The three of them spent hours together in the pasture, practicing maneuvers, running through exercises, and learning each other's rhythms. Slowly, Daniel noticed something he hadn't expected. Evelyn wasn't just teaching him about horses, she was teaching him about connection, patience, and courage. One evening, after a long day in the sun, Daniel sat on the wooden fence while Willow grazed nearby. Evelyn was untangling her long braid, her eyes catching the last of the sunset's gold. Daniel watched the way she moved, the soft smile she reserved for Willow, and a strange warmth bloomed in his chest. He told himself it was only gratitude, only respect, yet every time she laughed, the sound settled deep in his bones, and he felt a pull he couldn't explain. Then came the storm. A sudden spring thunderstorm rolled over the valley, dark clouds blotting out the sky. Willow panicked, her ears pinned back as the wind whipped around them. Daniel ran toward her, shouting her name, while Evelyn appeared at his side, guiding him to stay calm. Lightning split the sky, thunder shaking the ground beneath them, and Willow reared, trembling violently. Daniel's heart raced as he clung to her halter, his hands slick with rain and sweat. Evelyn stepped close, her voice steady, soothing both man and horse. "She's scared. Stay with her. She needs you calm." For the first time, Daniel realized the depth of their bond. Willow trusted him completely, more than anyone. And in that moment, he understood something he hadn't admitted before. He trusted Evelyn too. Her calm, her presence, her courage, it had become as essential as the air he breathed. The storm passed, leaving the valley drenched and sparkling under a hesitant sun. Willow's trembling slowed, and she nuzzled Daniel's shoulder. Evelyn's hand brushed his as she helped him steady the mare. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat, the world narrowed to the three of them, man, horse, and woman, bound together by something unspoken, growing stronger by the day. Daniel realized that the laughter from the auction, the ridicule he had faced, didn't matter anymore. What mattered was Willow and what Willow had brought into his life. And deep down, he knew that months later, when no one was laughing, it wouldn't just be because of the horse's transformation, it would be because of everything she had quietly changed in him. The smallest horse, the one everyone mocked, had set the stage for a story far bigger than anyone could imagine. Summer arrived in the Montana Valley with blazing heat and golden light, and Willow had grown into a strong, sleek mare. Her spirit had transformed completely. Once timid, now fierce and bold, carrying herself with pride that turned heads wherever she went. Daniel's neighbors, who had once whispered and snickered about the small, weak horse, now stopped in awe, asking questions, offering compliments. But Daniel barely noticed them anymore. His focus had shifted on Willow, on Evelyn, and on the quiet bond forming between the three of them. The relationship with Evelyn deepened. She stayed longer than she had planned, helping Daniel train Willow, teaching him advanced riding techniques, and showing him ways to connect with the horse on a level he had never imagined. And through long afternoons and evenings under the wide Montana sky, Daniel realized Evelyn had become indispensable to him, not just as a trainer, but as someone whose presence had begun to occupy his thoughts constantly. He couldn't explain how it happened, only that he no longer wanted her to leave. One afternoon, as Daniel and Willow practiced galloping across the open field, Evelyn rode alongside him on a gentle black mare, their laughter echoing through the valley. Suddenly, Willow spooked at a distant sound, her hooves thundering against the dry earth. Daniel clung tightly, his heart hammering, but Evelyn stayed calm, her hand reaching out to steady both him and the mare. In that split second, he felt a surge of emotion stronger than fear or relief, something raw, urgent, and undeniable. He realized he cared for Evelyn far more deeply than he had allowed himself to admit. Days later, as the sun set in fiery orange and pink over the horizon, Evelyn suggested a ride through the narrow canyon trails behind the ranch. Daniel hesitated, knowing some paths were dangerous, but her insistence carried a quiet authority he couldn't resist. Willow moved confidently beside Evelyn's mare, and Daniel felt a thrill of freedom he hadn't known he could feel. The valley was quiet, except for the distant calls of hawks and the soft crack of hooves against the earth. At the canyon's edge, they stopped. Evelyn dismounted first, brushing dust from her clothes, her dark hair catching the light. Daniel followed, his gaze lingering on her face, soft yet strong, radiant in the late sun. For a moment, the world felt suspended. He wanted to speak, to tell her everything that had been growing in his chest for weeks, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, he watched her watch Willow, who was pawing the ground, restless but obedient. Then the unexpected happened. Willow reared suddenly, startled by a shadow among the rocks. Daniel's heart leapt, but Evelyn was faster. She grabbed the reins, steadying both horses with a calm that amazed him. As she guided Willow back to balance, he felt a surge of emotion stronger than fear or relief, something raw, urgent, and undeniable. He realized he cared for Evelyn far more deeply than he had allowed himself to admit. That evening, as the sun disappeared behind the peaks and the valley cooled, they returned to the ranch. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Daniel found himself standing close to Evelyn near the barn, neither moving to leave. The quiet stretched between them, filled with everything they hadn't said: trust, gratitude, attraction, and something deeper, more fragile than either dared to name. Evelyn finally looked up at him, her eyes searching his. "You've changed," she said softly. Daniel swallowed, his chest tight. "I think it's not just me." Her hand brushed against his as she adjusted Willow's saddle. That small contact sent a spark through him, igniting feelings he had tried to ignore. For the first time, he understood that love could arrive quietly, almost unnoticed, until it hit with the force of a storm. And as they stood together under the fading twilight, Daniel realized the truth. Willow had saved him from more than just ridicule. It had opened the door to something he had never expected, a connection that could change his life forever. The laughter from months ago had vanished. In its place was courage, hope, and a love that had been waiting quietly in the shadows, ready to reveal itself at the perfect moment. Autumn arrived in the valley, painting the fields in shades of gold and amber. Willow had matured into a magnificent mare, her muscles sleek and her spirit untamed yet obedient, a perfect reflection of the bond she shared with Daniel. The neighbors who had once mocked him for choosing the smallest, weakest horse now watched in awe as Willow carried him across the open fields, moving with grace and power that no one had expected. The laughter was gone, replaced by quiet admiration and whispered respect. Daniel and Evelyn's connection had deepened in ways neither of them could have predicted. They worked side by side every day, training, caring for the horses, and managing the ranch, and every shared glance or gentle touch carried unspoken meaning. Daniel felt a warmth in her presence that no compliment or praise could replace. It was more than friendship, more than gratitude. It was love, quietly rooting itself in every conversation, every ride, every shared sunrise and sunset. One chilly morning, the valley was shrouded in mist as Daniel led Willow to the creek. Evelyn followed on her black mare, their breaths visible in the crisp air. Willow pawed at the ground, restless with energy, and Daniel felt a familiar thrill run through him as he watched her. Evelyn laughed softly, a sound that made his chest tighten in a way he couldn't ignore. She dismounted, brushing her hair behind her ear, and approached him. Her eyes met his, steady and warm, and Daniel realized he could no longer hold back the feelings that had been growing all summer. "I never thought," he began, his voice low, "that choosing Willow would lead to this." Evelyn smiled, a gentle, knowing curve of her lips. "Sometimes the smallest things have the biggest impact," she said. Her hand found his, fingers intertwining naturally. The touch was electric, carrying months of unspoken emotion. For the first time, Daniel allowed himself to truly feel the depth of what was between them. They rode together through the valley, Willow and Evelyn's mare moving side by side, the horse's hooves stirring the fallen leaves. Daniel glanced at Evelyn, watching her hair catch the sunlight, the determined set of her jaw, the way she laughed even in the cold air. His heart swelled with love, admiration, and a quiet gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought them together. Willow had been the unlikely bridge between them, guiding them toward each other with patience, loyalty, and unspoken understanding. As the sun dipped behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Daniel stopped at the top of a hill overlooking the valley. Willow nuzzled his shoulder, and Evelyn stood close beside him. The world felt impossibly large and impossibly small at once, vast, open, and full of possibility. "Willow changed everything," Daniel whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. "But you changed everything too." Evelyn's eyes softened, and she reached up to touch his cheek. "We changed everything together," she replied. And in that quiet, golden moment, Daniel understood that life was not about the size of the horse he had chosen, nor the laughter of those who doubted him. It was about courage, loyalty, and the unexpected love that can grow when you least expect it. Willow had saved him from ridicule, guided him through challenges, and led him to the woman he would never let go of. From that day forward, Daniel, Evelyn, and Willow were inseparable. The small, underestimated horse had become a legend in the valley, but more importantly, it had brought together two hearts that had been quietly waiting for the right moment to find each other. The laughter of others was gone, replaced by admiration, respect, and the kind of love that changes everything forever. And as the stars appeared above the Montana Valley that night, Daniel held Evelyn close, Willow grazing beside them. He knew that some choices, no matter how small or unlikely, can shape a lifetime in ways you never imagined.